And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather is showing some gusty wind conditions with snow turning into some blowing and drifting snow here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tonight, with improving conditions back to the west. Not too bad here over the interior, less in the way of snow, definitely, and still some lingering scattered snow showers here north of the eastern Alaska range, but mostly south of the Yukon Flats there. And mostly clear, south central Alaska. Then pick up a few clouds there in the Kuskokwim Valley out to the coast, but nothing serious. And pretty good conditions out here over the Bering Sea with high pressure centered out to the west there. Isolated showers, Adak and Atka, and diminishing chances of rain as this system drops off to the east-southeast here. And the front really has fallen apart. And still this low here south of the eastern North Gulf Coast keeps a chance of showers in over the northern panhandle, mainly over the northern panhandle, with less of a threat down toward Dixon Entrance. And then for tomorrow, southwest flow here, showers, pretty good chance of light rain or showers here from Yakutat all the way down to Ketchikan and Klawock and those areas. Mostly sunny over southern Alaska, western Alaska, all the way up into the Noatak Valley there in the western Brooks Range. Blizzard warning out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for winds gusting to 55 miles an hour with 2 to 4 inches of snow. And that'll result in visibilities less than a quarter mile at times for both Thursday and Friday. Much better conditions off to the west there. High pressure continues to dominate the Bering Sea here with just some isolated shower activity possible for the eastern Aleutians. And then for the day on Friday, a weak system here pushing warmer air and chance of some moisture here from the northwest coast down to the Seward Peninsula, maybe even the northern Yukon Delta coast, but that'll be pretty light, whatever does fall. Cold high pressure in over the Brooks Range and North Slope. Still looking at those gusty west winds with snow and blowing snow and blizzard warning out there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And could see some gusty northeast winds, Mananuska Valley up to 55 miles an hour, as well as the North Gulf Coast, Copper River Delta area. Breezy but sunny for Kodiak Island. A weak front out here to the west brings a chance of rain into the western Aleutians. Much stronger storm brings gale force winds and rain in across the southern southeast coast. So looking at those coastal water forecasts for tomorrow, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots on the south coast, west-southwest 15 to 20 on the central coast, and then east of 15 to 20 for the north coast. And the central southern interchannels, south winds 15 knots, southeast of 15 for Clarence Strait. And then for the day on Friday, we'll see that storm coming up, bringing gale force winds into the south coast, southeast of 40 knots there along Prince of Wales Island. Otherwise, the central coast here looking at east-northeasterlies 30 to 35 knots, and east-northeast at 20 to 30 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, northeast winds 30 knots with higher gusts. Small craft advisories for Stevens Passage, northeast at 25, seas 5 feet. Gale warnings also for Clarence Strait, southeast at 35 knots. And for tomorrow, Prince William Sound, small craft advisories for a northeast wind at 25 knots and 4-foot seas. Eastern North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories as well. North winds 25 to 30 knots with 50-knot gusts blowing out of the Copper River Delta. Small craft advisories for the western North Gulf Coast for north winds at 25 knots with 35-knot winds blowing out of Resurrection Bay. And we've got north winds 25 knots for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay northeast at 25 for southern Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet north at 25 knots with 5 to 7 foot seas here through the inlet. And for the day on Friday, north winds 25 knots, Cook Inlet, seas up to 7 feet. Northwesterlies at 30 knots for Kamishak Bay. Gale warnings for the Barren Islands north at 35 knots. North at 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories, Prince William Sound, eastern North Gulf Coast, north winds in those areas 25 to 30 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Kodiak Island, northeasterlies at 25 tomorrow with 5 to 6 foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, north to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots and northeast at 20 for Bristol Bay. Then for Friday, the Alaska Peninsula, west-northwesterlies at 20 to 25 knots, northwest at 25 for Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island. Small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Eastern Aleutians, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots there with seas up to 10 feet. Central Aleutians, north 25 to 30 knots with 6 to 9 foot seas. And then for the western Aleutians there, south to southeast winds 25 knots. Outlook for Friday, western Aleutians, west to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. Not too bad for Adak and Atka. Northwesterlies at 15 knots there, seas down to 3 to 5 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, north winds 20 to 25 knots. Southwest coast here, north to northwest winds 10 to 20 knots. Northwest at 5 knots for St. Lawrence Island, and a northeast breeze at 10 for Norton Sound. For the St. Matthew Island area, west at 15, north at 20 for the Pribilof Islands. And then for the day Friday, Pribilof's northwest at 15 knots. Small craft advisories, Kuskokwim Delta Coast, north winds 25 knots. Southwest at 20 for St. Matthew Island with seas at about 7 feet. Otherwise, northwest at 10 for the Yukon Delta Coast, becoming west at 10 for St. Lawrence Island, and south winds 10 knots for Norton Sound. For the Chukchi Sea tomorrow, east to southeast winds, just 5 to 10 knots. North winds at 10 knots for the western Arctic coast, picking up to 20 knots for the central Arctic coast, seas at about 5 feet there. And then, as you can see, winds increasing here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with the gale warnings roughly from Flaxman Island to Demarcation Point or so, 40 knots out of the west with 8-foot seas. Those continue into Friday as well with 8-foot seas there, sliding back to 15 knots with 4-foot seas from the northwest on the central Arctic coast and swinging around southeast at 10. Western Arctic coast, Chukchi Sea, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots.